Iron Maiden Somewhere in Time. Some of you who have been following this channel for the past few years that I've been posting things probably already know my opinion about this album. And for those of you who don't, let me tell you. Somewhere in Time is my favorite Iron Maiden album. I am very biased towards this album. To me, and talking to other Iron Maiden fans and asking them what their favorite album is, they'll say Power Slave, they'll say Number of the Beast, they'll say the self-titled, they'll say Power Slave, and Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, and more Power Slave, and Peace of Mind. I've never heard anybody once say that Somewhere in Time is their favorite Iron Maiden album. I'm not sure if it's the fact that it's such a radical departure from what we've heard before. I mean, listen to Power Slave and then listen to this album. They're completely different in terms of sound. This is the era of Iron Maiden where they began to go a little progressive. This would come full circle with the next album, which is a concept album. Somewhere in Time, to me, is the best Iron Maiden album because they did something different. After probably years of somebody saying, you know, all of your albums sound the same ever since you hired Dickinson, they probably decided, what can we do differently? Well, let's start adding guitar sets. Let's start making a bigger sound. Let's add some flange and some chorus into our guitar sound. Let's make our songs longer. Let's make our solos a lot more intricate. Somewhere in Time, to me, it always has a special place in my heart, as it is not only the first Iron Maiden album I ever heard, but probably because I am just in love with the guitar sound on this album. I have tried for years to try to get this guitar sound, but to no avail. Some of my favorite tracks, and granted, this album does have some slow tracks in it. I do love the opening track, Caught Somewhere in Time. I think that it has some of the best riffs and solos from Iron Maiden I've ever heard. Wasted Years, being one of the singles from this album, is still in constant live rotation for them today. Sea of Madness is probably the most underrated song from this album. I think Sea of Madness is definitely different for Iron Maiden in terms of lyrical content. I've never heard Bruce Dickinson ever come up with lyrics like this, but as far as I'm aware of, Bruce Dickinson didn't have much of an input on this album. And maybe that's why it sounds so different. Maybe it's because all this time we've had Bruce's input, then he puts very, very minimal into Somewhere in Time. Heaven Can Wait, as far as I know, they play this live every once in a while. But the next track is a track that I wish Iron Maiden would play live, at least once. Somewhere in Time is the album that is the hardest to find live videos for. I have tried for so long to find a quality video of tracks played from the album. They're very hard to find, especially this next song, The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, which probably has some of the best breakdowns, bridges, and melodies in Iron Maiden history, in my opinion. The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner is one of my favorite Iron Maiden songs. And I can't write... When people ask me about Somewhere in Time, if I don't play the opening track, that is the track that I play for them, The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner. Moving on, you have the second single from the album, Stranger in a Strange Land, which is a bit of a slowdown. They kind of scaled it back a little bit. Definitely a very melodic song, slower, definitely screams radio single. And then the seventh track, Deja Vu, which has, again, like The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, has great melody and great riffs. This is an album that, if you're a guitarist, this is an album for you. Even if you're a bassist, the bass on this album is insane. Drumming, not so much. Drumming is very stock. And then we close out the album with, I guess, the quote-unquote epic, Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great is a history lesson in an Iron Maiden song. It's detailing the life of Alexander the Great. It's really, lyrically, if I wanted to learn about Alexander the Great, I'd pull up Wikipedia, but instrumentally, about 4 minutes in, when we get to the solos, that's when this thing starts to get a little awesome. Just a little. By a little, I mean a lot. 51 minutes of awesomeness. That is how I think of Somewhere in Time. This is definitely an album that if I wouldn't, for someone who's never heard Iron Maiden before, I'm not going to give them Somewhere in Time. That to me, I think they need to go with something a little bit earlier. Like, I would probably give them Peace of Mind before I would give them this, or even Power Slave. Somewhere in Time always has a special place in my heart, and I love this album to death, and I can't see myself ever losing this album. I have a physical copy of this album somewhere around here. I still have it fully unpacked from my move. But this is an album that is very near and dear to me, and being the first Iron Maiden album I ever heard, there's definitely sentimental value in this album. So I'm a little bit biased towards this, and as you're probably guessing, I am going to give it a 10 out of 10, but I just can't help it. I think this album is so great. It's awesome. Listen to it if you haven't listened to it already. Danny here from Metal Couch. Seventh Son of the Seventh Son.